On the phone. Sample live. I don't
Captain said he had an axe 3 years ago. That was second.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how excited we are to be here to talk about PFAS, to talk about the testing program that Montgomery County and Butler Township have put in place. And so just want to, first of all, thank Aullwood for letting us use their facility again. So next thing I'd like to do is just kind of introduce some of the people from the county and the township that are here. If you haven't signed up for well testing, we have people who will help you on computers. If you have, thank you so much. We have, I think as of this morning, like 63 people that had already signed up, which is really great. We're excited about that. When we're done, there'll still be computers that somebody will help you with. If you hate computers, you're not computer savvy or whatever, we're just going to ask you some questions so that we know where the best place to get a sample is from your water system so that it's representative of what's in it. So I guess first, Matt Hilliard, Montgomery County Director of Environmental Services. Megan O'Leary, Public Information Officer from Montgomery County, and Tiffany, where did you go? There she is, Tiffany Petrie. She's the project manager and the one that tries to keep me in line, which is a job in and of itself. For Butler Township, we have Mike Tyne, Township Trustee, Erica Vogel, Township Administrator. Do I have anybody else? Anybody else from the township that's here? No. Okay, so that's it. All right. Those people. I am Linda Aller. I am the geologist from Bennett Williams. Carrie Zawiski, she's in the back there. She's one of the people that will be happy to help you sign up. Cayman Goostree, he's another geologist, so I have a kindred spirit here today. And Sarah Strack, she's back there too. All those people will be happy to help you sign up if you haven't signed up. And if you're impressed about people who program computers, Sarah was the one that programmed the survey for you. If you guys had an opportunity to do that online, because that is incredible as far as I'm concerned. So how this works today is you're going to have to listen to me talk for a little while. I'm going to tell you more things about PFAS than you ever wanted to know, probably. So these are the kind of questions that I usually get when I talk about these things. So here's what we're going to do. What are PFAS? How did we get here? Why should I be concerned if it's in my water? What are they used for? Where are they found in the environment? How am I exposed? What are the potential health effects if I am exposed? Concentrations of PFAS in drinking water. Let's play the numbers game because there's a big numbers game. Where does my water come from? How do I get my water tested? And then what's the schedule of what we're doing here? And then we should have a bunch of time for questions. So that's where we're going. And please keep your questions because we'd like very much to answer them. Okay. First of all, we can blame this all on an Ohio guy. His name was Roy Plunkett. He was a chemist. He worked for DuPont, and he had a failed experiment when he was just 28 years old. And he came up with this waxy type of a material that was supposed to happen when he was dealing with the refrigerant. It became known as Teflon. DuPont patented it. And if any of you are a little bit older than me, when Teflon was introduced to consumers in 1949, and by the 1960s, everybody had a Teflon pan. Okay, so that's how all this PFAS stuff really started. So we have a Ohio guy to thank for all of this. So what are PFAS? Well, PFAS technically are called per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And obviously you just saw they've been around since World War II, and that's when they really were started to be used before they went to consumer products. But they have all the properties that all of us love. Grease repellent, stain repellent, waterproof, vortex jackets, heat resistant, stain resistant, slippery. They make things flow easily. They're used in all kinds of things, and that's the problem. They're used in all kinds of things. What makes them unique is this carbon-fluorine bond. It's the strongest bond in nature. So when you think of like water, you know, H2O, it's got a hydrogen and an oxygen. You kind of remember this, right? You gotta have bonds. Well, this carbon-fluorine bond is so hard to break that it's almost impossible, which gave these chemicals the name forever chemicals, because they stick around forever because they don't want to break down. The bonds don't want to break. So now there are estimated to be 12,000 of these perfluorinated and polyfluorinated substances, which are the reason that we're here today. But as we go through this, you're going to realize that really we only know a lot about maybe 10, 20, maybe 100 of these 12,000 things. And a couple things really quickly. The number of carbons is how they name a lot of these things. So if you hear something like C8, C8 is the Teflon chemical, means it has 4 or 8 carbons, C8, 8 carbons, 8 fluorines. And it used to be thought that the more carbon and fluorine bonds there were, the more health effects that would be there. So there are compounds that have like up to 15 and then like down to basically 1. And so when the government asked a lot of companies to take these things out of commerce, try to get them out, still give us our products that we all wanted to buy. They thought by reducing the number of carbon and fluorine bonds from like C8 to C6, so there'd be 6 of them, that would make them have less health effects. And so as we kind of go through this, I'm going to just tell you the difference between like C8 and C6s and kind of what that got us. Okay, so how did we get here? Well, we got here because the Ohio EPA decided they were going to test about 1,500 public water systems for 6 different perfluorinated compounds. And they did that in 2020. They were a little bit later than they wanted to be because they were in the middle of the pandemic. But You guys may have got some of these letters. The Ohio Department of Health, as soon as they knew that Aullwood had a problem here, Aullwood had a well, and they actually were one of the 2 out of the 1,500 systems, public systems in the state of Ohio that were tested by the Ohio EPA that had something which tripped a number that was in force and effect at that time. And they took the number to 70 parts per trillion. We'll talk about that a little bit. But Aullwood had, if you added PFAS and PFOA together, PFOA and PFOS, the 2 chemicals that have been studied the most, they're both C8s, okay? They couldn't add up to more than 70, and Aullwood had them add up to more than 70. So I'm sure you're aware that Aullwood now no longer has a well and has a water line that was run to it. I'm sure you all saw the construction. So they came out and tested those 6 things. The health department got concerned because they knew that everybody had wells around here. And so the health department started in January of 2021, also sampled again in March 2021 and May 2021. And in those 3 sampling rounds, they sampled 49 wells, and they found PFAS and PFOA, the same things that were here, not above that limit, but they found 5 wells out of the 49 that they tested had those chemicals in them. And as a result, on July 1st, 2021, they issued a Citizens Health Advisory. They set up this map. So if you're in the pink area, that was their recommended sampling area. And they recommended that all residents in the pink area consider testing their well water for PFAS. So they couldn't test them all, but they recommended that anybody that lived in that pink area have their well tested. So your township and your county went and got some funding for you, and that is why we are here. So as of the middle of July, our company, Ben & Williams, was hired to come and collect samples for free for everybody that lives in that pink area. So in addition to that, we were hired to compile some information on PFAS health effects. If you haven't been to the Butler Township website, please try to go there. You go at the top where it says community, there's a little, sometimes I think it might be a little bit difficult to find. So here you go, find community. And then underneath that, it says like something like area of contamination or contamination study. What does it say?
Water contamination issue.
There, contamination issue. So there's lots of good information on the website. So if you'd like to go there, but there is a health effects document that's there if you want to read more when we're done. So the second part of our contract says we're going to hold these public meetings and figure out a way to get all you guys signed up so that you take advantage, if you're in the pink area, of that free testing. And then we're in the process, and we're just about done with our portion, at least before it goes out for review, for compiling information on water treatment. So if you want to know about point of use filters, those are the kinds that go on your faucet, or point of entry, which is the kind that goes in your whole house, or what you should know about bottled water, that is going to eventually be posted also on the Butler Township website. So that if for some reason, when we test your water, if you have an issue, you have some immediate options that you can employ. So then we're going to sample, and then the phase 3 is to conduct a water quality analysis of nearby municipal public water systems and provide a long-term potable source recommendation to Butler Township. So that is what we were hired to do. So let's get back to the important stuff. Why should you be? Well, first of all, you have to know that not every well that's been tested has perfluorinated compounds in it. Not everybody has PFAS in their wells, okay? But if you do, your single biggest exposure to PFAS is through water. So, but PFAS is used for everything. So you're going to have lots of different exposures too. So, okay, so you've got nonstick cookware, good old Teflon pans, grease-proof fast food wrappers. So every time you go to McDonald's or Burger King, I'm not going to pick on any name brands here, all those things that keep the grease from coming off on your dog food bags, those kinds of things, they all have PFAS in them. And they can all then get on your food, and then you eat the food, and then you eat a little bit of PFAS every time. So stain-resistant carpet. Every time we used to buy carpet, we always had our carpet stain mastered or stain proofed, or we had them sprayed. Every time you had your carpet cleaned, you had it sprayed because it was stain proof. And who wanted to get stains on their carpet? Those kinds of things have PFAS in them. Water repellent clothing, my favorite was Gore-Tex. When it came out, and I had a raincoat that was breathable. It was like great. Those things have PFAS in them. Cosmetics and personal care products, this is the latest. The latest things say about half of the cosmetics out there have PFAS in them. Dental floss. Yeah. Anybody like that waxed glide stuff? Yeah. Okay. PFAS does that for you, makes it slippery, slide easy. If ski wax, anybody a skier here? Yeah. People that actually, there are actually professional ski waxer guys that do it for professionals, and they heat up the ski wax. They have some of the highest levels of exposure in almost any industry, which I thought was interesting. So just be careful when you wax your skis. Household polishes, waxes, cleaning products, they're everywhere. Got this figured out yet? Paints, inks, coatings, make them flow easy, okay? Slippery, slidey, stain-proof, grease-proof. Some firefighting foams, only the fluorine-based ones, not all. Oil and gas drilling. They add surfactants. Surfactants make things slippery, so they go fast. Semiconductor and communication cables. So everybody's seen that, you know, we're going to have a new chip factory in Columbus, and all those semiconductors are going to be using PFAS. Pesticides and insecticides, the new things that have just come out is they used to add to make them flow easily, like to come out of nozzles and, you know, not gum up and get stuck. But apparently the HDPE is a type of plastic that the pesticides are stored in. They actually fluorinate the containers, and then you dump the pesticides in them, and then it comes right back out, and then now you're going to spread PFAS on all of your crops. And metals coating processes. It used to be for, if anybody ever worked in like a chrome plant, they had great big vats, and the vats had, if you were close to the vat, when they put the electric charge into it, it used to send it into the air. So it was actually required from a health and safety standpoint to put some PFAS that formed a coating or a film on top so that you didn't get all the metals in the air and breathe them and have problems. So the other thing too is I see that little microwave popcorn bag there. So I've given lots of talks, and for a long time I was known as the lady that said, please don't eat the microwave popcorn. It was the only thing that I gave up. I've been doing perfluorinated compounds for 20 years when nobody knew what they were. And I've been working with people in the mid-Ohio Valley that had the highest level of any public water supply anywhere in the world in their water, okay, when they started. But the microwave popcorn, it's got a grease-proof bag, think about it, on it. And then it's got that little like heating element that makes it get real hot to take all that butter that sits on the bottom and make it go all over your microwave popcorn. But when you heat it up to that temperature, it leaches all the perfluorinated compounds out of the bag right into the butter, and then it evenly coats that popcorn for you. And there's a new study, I always thought I wouldn't be vindicated, but there was a new study that came out a couple of years ago that said if you ate microwave popcorn every day for a year, that the concentration of PFAS in your blood goes up 65%. So, water, food, got the idea. Okay, so where do we find it in the environment then? Okay, well, it makes a lot of sense. Y'all know that it's in water. So you can see the thing where it says groundwater, those are like a well in your yard or monitoring wells or those other ones. So groundwater also then flows out and meets the sometimes. That's what a spring is. So if it's in the groundwater and it's out, then it makes sense that you'd have it in springs. Then it gets out and it gets into a creek, makes sense. And it's also in the sediment in the bottom of the creek. And then it flows to the river. And sometimes, factories discharge PFAS into the river. And sometimes it's just coming from other places too. And the latest study is now it's in the rain. You guys may have seen it. It's in the newspaper all the time. I used to joke. I used to read every technical article there was about PFAS. And now I can't even read the titles of the newspaper articles that tell me there's something new that's being studied. So the latest study says it's raining enough PFAS that you don't want to drink the water. So don't drink the rain anymore. I mean, that just tells you that it's everywhere. Now, how does it get in the rain? Well, it's in the air. And this was the fascinating thing that nobody really thought about. Everybody thought, well, if you were close to a factory, they dumped it on the ground or they dumped it in the river. That's where it came from. But it actually goes airborne. It's in the Arctic. It's in the Antarctic. It's in the snow cores that they take in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So it is in everything. We have successfully spread PFAS all over the world, so much that 97% of us all already have it in our blood. Oh, one thing. Forgot to tell you probably the most important thing. See that little one down in the corner? It says biosolids or household dust. So biosolids are sludge that comes out of a wastewater treatment plant. So we all know the beneficial uses of sludge, where you take it and you put it on the farmer's field. It decreases the amount of nitrogen and nutrients that the farmer has to add. Plus, it also gets rid of the sludge that we all generate in the wastewater treatment plants. Well, there's the classic study of the gentleman in Maine who had a dairy farm, 3rd generation dairy farm. And this he's not a young guy anymore. He lost all of his cows because he put sludge on his land legally and had no idea, and nobody had any idea, that it also had PFAS in it. His cows ate the grass that grew on the sludge, and his milk became adulterated, so he couldn't sell his milk. And he's not the only one. There's more stories like that. So if you have a source in your water treatment plant and you use that sludge, now we know that there might be a problem. The other thing is just household dust. Who would have thought that you would have PFAS in household dust? So don't look too close at that picture. That actually is my closet. But I didn't clean it because I knew I wanted a picture of household dust. So your clothes make dust, your carpet makes dust, just walking around makes dust. I mean, sitting on your couch makes dust. So if you ever had to have a reason to clean your house, which generally I need because I really don't like to do that, here's your opportunity to reduce your exposure to PFAS by just making sure you don't have as much dust. Okay. It gets into plants. It's uptake from the soil. It's in invertebrates. It's in fish. There are a lot of places that have fish advisories. The fish swim in the stream that has the PFAS in it. It gets in their body. You eat the fish gets in you. It's a problem. Cow's milk. We talked about. Poor Fred. I've met Fred, the man who has the cows in Maine. Bird eggs. All over the world. Fruits, vegetables. People used to call me and ask me, is it in the deer? And can I still eat deer? And now the latest studies show that yes, it's in deer. Yes, it's in your pets. Yes, it's in your cows. Yes, it's in your vegetables. If you grow vegetables and the rain is contaminated or you use contaminated water to grow them, you will have, again, small amounts of PFAS. Okay, so how are you exposed? Well, we talked about drinking contaminated water, eating contaminated food, fish, food raised in contaminated soil, water from contaminated water, food raised by contaminated, rain home by contaminated rain, or leaks from food packaging. That's the microwave popcorn example. Okay. Working with PFAS in the workplace. So if you work in a factory that coats carpets, for example, or whatever, manufacturing, firefighting, all kinds of industries, aerospace, and my full-time firefighter son-in-law, some stain repellent and water repellent clothing. And that would be from, things that are waterproof, things that you have, sprayed so they're stain resistant. Some cosmetics and personal care. I saw the latest things that 50% of cosmetics have PFAS in them. So all you guys, when you put on your makeup this morning, you were exposed. What I thought was interesting is they're saying it's long-lasting things. It's like, well, okay, like makeup when you put on your skin, maybe I get it, but mascara was one of the big things, and it's the waterproofness in mascara, or the long-lasting lipstick where you actually eat it, apparently. Where you might put sunscreen on and then might not wash your hands before you grab the hamburger that you were barbecuing out with if you were, doing something. And now you've eaten it. So all kinds of weird exposures, even shampoo. Yeah. So that little red thing says special risks for babies and toddlers. And the reason that I put that in there is this has been the focus recently of the US EPA to get the word out that mothers do pass PFAS if they have it in their blood. They do pass it to their babies across the umbilical cord. You can get it from breast milk, and you can get it when you feed your baby with formula by mixing it with contaminated water. So you just need to be aware that dust from rugs, who are the ones that are down on the floor? Certainly not me in my closet cleaning it all the time, apparently, but if you have a little kid that's crawling around on a carpet or whatever, those kinds of things, clothes, upholstery. And what they do is they get it on their hands. And what do they do with their hands? They're always putting their hands in their mouth. So that's why babies and toddlers are exposed more than you or I. Unless, of course, we're crawling around on the floor with them and have the same problems. Okay, so just because there's this really scary list of health effects up here doesn't mean that you're going to have any of them. Okay, it's just like anything else. It means that the higher your exposure, the longer your exposure, and if you're susceptible to it, you could develop these potential health effects, okay? So here we go. Cancer, it's always the biggie. Kidney, testicular, and prostate have been around for a little while. Liver just came out within the last year. Thyroid disease, ulcerative colitis. If you're a woman and you're pregnant, you have a higher risk of preeclampsia and high blood pressure. Increased cholesterol levels for all of us. It doesn't matter whether we're a man or a woman. The lowered antibody response to vaccine, I kind of want you to remember that because that's kind of the thing that's going to drive our numbers game a little bit here. And I don't say that to be pejorative. I just simply, there have been numbers change and science changes. And as we know more and more or know something different, we keep changing our minds about what's okay and what's not okay. So there was a big study when the COVID-19 vaccines came out to see if people who had higher levels of PFAS in their blood had less resistance to COVID. And they found that vaccines don't take as well when you have higher levels of PFAS in your blood. So that's a real thing. We're going to talk about that issue in children, but lowering your chance of getting pregnant by lowering fertility, that's for the women, and lowering sperm counts and sperm quality and sperm mobility. So it's clearly going after your reproductive systems. Developmental effects in babies. Remember, women are passing it to their babies, such as smaller head circumference, decreased birth weights, shorter penises, interfering with hormones, both on the far end for menopause and on the short end for puberty. An increased chance of obesity, but particularly in women and not in men, which I thought was interesting. Effects on growth, learning, and behavior of infants and children, and changes in liver enzymes. So that's a long list. So, all right. Okay, so let's talk about numbers in water. So these numbers are in water, and you need to understand that. Remember, we got 12,000 of these chemicals floating around out there, but we don't know too much about most of them, and most of the research has been done on PFAS and PFOA, the ones that were found in the wells here. So back in 2009, oh my gosh, like that was so long ago, right? The US EPA came out with a health advisory for the two that were being studied, PFAS and PFOA. And you can kind of see those numbers that say 400 parts per trillion for PFOA and 200 parts per trillion for PFAS. And I will put in a minute in perspective how small a part per trillion is, okay? But that's what they thought for an acute exposure. Not like if you were exposed to it over a lifetime, but if you were exposed to it for a short period of time, you could have a bigger exposure and it probably wouldn't cause health effects. And they didn't even have half that list of health effects at that time. By 2019, the US EPA has got a whole lot more data. It's 10 years later. And they're issuing what's called drinking water health advisories. Health advisories are not regulatory. So they are advisories. And they have these same two compounds now with the 70 number. Remember I talked about the 70 number for Aullwood here? So they had this 70 that if you had PFAS or PFOA and you added them together and you had 70 or more, that was an issue. But it's not a regulatory thing. So in order to be regulatory, it has to be something called a maximum contaminant level. And then those public water systems have to treat. They don't have a choice. Right now, these are health advisories, okay? And the difference and the reason they lowered the number is this is a lifetime exposure now, not just an acute one, okay, where you can be exposed to it for a little bit more short term. This is long-term stuff. So if you're going to be drinking the water all of your life, that's a long-term exposure. So those numbers held, and that's kind of like if anybody had their water tested by the health department or anybody else in the past, the action levels, and we'll talk about those, that's kind of how they got here. So those were health advisory levels for long-term. Well, on June 15th this year, things got a little bit more exciting. Now, there had been a push to, everybody said that number is way too high. And the US EPA is getting ready, supposedly, to put out what's called an MCL, which will be enforceable for PFAS and PFOA. And that's supposed to be out later this year as a draft. And then hopefully within a year, they'll have it as a final, and that will apply to all public water systems just like it does normally, okay? But in the meantime, on June 15th, we all thought the numbers were going down, but we had no idea. And I'll have to tell you the quick story. So I happen to be in North Carolina. North Carolina is another place where the replacement chemical for PFOA, which is called Gen X, the DuPont plant, the Commerce plant, is kind of contaminated like the whole area down there with Gen X, just like the Mid-Ohio Valley was contaminated with PFOA. And I was at a meeting, there were about 250 people, which I knew a lot of those people because I worked in it so long, but happened to walk in and I just happened to sit down, and Rob Bellot and I were talking. I don't know if you know who Rob Bellot is. He was the attorney. He's actually the attorney from Cincinnati that tried the first case that brought all this PFAS stuff to light. And if you've ever seen the movie Dark Waters, he's the one that starred in that, kind of like the Aaron Brockovich for Chromium, you know. So anyway, we just kind of sat down and we were, doing one of those old time things. Hey, gee, things have changed a lot, haven't they? And he says, yeah, I can hardly wait to hear the lady from the Office of Water, the director, US EPA. She's got some things she's going to announce. And it's like, yeah, well, the numbers are going down. Yeah, I know all that. Okay, fine. So she starts talking and she starts out. And she's going to talk about Gen X first because we're in North Carolina, and that's the thing that everybody's concerned about there. So North Carolina had adopted their own number at 140 parts per trillion. And she announces, oh no, US EPA is adopting a new health advisory level for Gen X, which they've never had before, for 10. And the whole place went like bananas, okay? Okay, because those numbers are pretty little. Then she turned around and said, well, this is the replacement chemical for PFAS. So this is the replacement chemical for PFOA. This is the replacement chemical for PFAS. And we're adopting this number at 2,000 parts per trillion. And you can kind of see why the effects, those are the health effects that go with those particular chemicals. And then she didn't say anything else. She kept kind of talking. about other things that related to Gen X and the local area. And then she says, oh, and by the way, we've lowered the numbers on PFAS and PFOA to 0.004 and 0.020. And I'm going, oh my gosh, they've lowered them to 4 and 2. And I looked at Rob, who's sitting next to me, and I said, oh my gosh, they did. They lowered them like from 70 to 4 and 2. And he says, no, Linda. I said, what do you mean, no, Linda? He said, 0.004 and 0.020. And I said, like parts per quadrillion? He says, yeah. And I said, labs can't even test for that yet. They can't see it that little yet. The laboratory has the detection limits right down here. It says 2 parts per trillion. I said, well, what are labs going to do? And he says, Linda, you're missing the point. I said, which? He says, if you detect it, it's a problem. At whatever level you can detect it, it's now a problem. Now, the word on the streets is these are interim health advisories, and they are not going to be what the MCLs are going to be. But the word on the streets is those MCLs are going to be pretty doggone low still. And the samples that we will run will only be able to detect down to that number, just a tiny bit below, depending upon what run they're in the laboratory. So now EPA says, from my lifetime health exposure, I have a bigger problem at numbers I can't even see in the test. So that's what this said. Okay. So I tell you the story only because I really thought those numbers were way, way too little. Even I missed it, and I've been doing it for a long time. So let's see. Okay, so perspective. Okay, here's your perspective. 1 part per trillion is 1 drop in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. I can't even fathom that. Okay, 4 parts per quadrillion, which is just what EPA lowered this interim health advisory now, not regulatory to, is 1 drop in 5,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And 20 parts per quadrillion, which is the PFAS number, is 1 drop in 1,000. Okay? So I think what they're trying to tell us is these chemicals are a little bit problematic than what they thought in the beginning. Okay? Okay, so that was US EPA's numbers in. Okay, so here's Ohio's. So December 3rd, 2019, Ohio, when they were getting ready to sample those 1,500 plus public water systems, adopted action levels. Action levels are not MCLs. Action levels are things where they recommend you take action, okay? And they actually established a number for each of the 6 chemicals that they tested. And then that the health department came out and tested, okay? So here's PFAS and PFOA. You can see this 70 number hanging around. And then Gen X was 700. Remember, I just told you Gen X, the feds just went to 10. And PFAS, that's the other one that just went to 2,000. And then those other 2, which are still there. Then when Ohio EPA had better data, they turned around in March this year, which is still prior to when US EPA put out all this other stuff. And they changed their numbers. They didn't change PFAS or PFOA. They stuck with the 70 because that's what the feds had. But they lowered Gen X to 21 and PFBS to 2,100. So 21 isn't very far off of 10, and 2,100 isn't very far off of 2,000. So you can see the science, and the government's catching up with the science. Okay, so this is the where does my water come from slide. So I think you all know that if you have wells, the water here comes out of rock. Yes? Everybody know that their wells actually get the water out of the rock. Most of your water comes out of this thing that I just kind of picked. This is the typical geologist. This is a symbol for limestone. So it's kind of perfect because it looks like little blocks. And what happens is when the water is flowing through this, it's flowing through it like this, generally. It flows through the cracks. Doesn't actually flow through the solid limestone. It wants to flow through the cracks. So I kind of did this. This is 9 miles across. You can see the Miami River Valley on the left. On the right, sorry about that. And you can see the Stillwater River Valley over here. Those valleys have a bunch of sand and gravel in them, complements of the glaciers. And most public water systems can't get enough water out of rock with cracks in it. They go after sand and gravel. So most of your public water systems are located in these sand and gravels in those valleys. You, however, don't need a whole lot of water to run your house. And so you actually get yours out of the cracks and the rocks. So to put this in perspective, this is 100 feet from here to here, okay? And if you can think, it's 9 miles across, and then we really exaggerated the scale so you can kind of see what was going on. So here's Clyde, Frederick, Air Park Boulevard. And what we did was stand on Jackson and cut a line east to west. So if you just pulled the soil and the rock away, and you stood here, you would now be looking north from Jackson Road, okay? And this is what you would see. And so the water in this area wants to flow from the north towards you now, because you're standing in the middle like this. So the water's coming towards you, or the water wants to go towards those two valleys, okay? So when your water is tested, sometimes if you have a well that's only 60 feet deep, you're much different than a well that maybe your neighbor has that's 115 feet deep. So typically that's the range of depths in this area for your wells, but it makes a difference which crack you intersect. So when you get your water tested and you maybe have something in your well, but your neighbor doesn't, but you're 50 feet away from them with your wells or something, the reason is they're in a different crack. Okay, so they might be shallower, they might be deeper, the water might flow a little bit different than yours. Sometimes your water will look just like your neighbors because you intersect the same cracks from a water quality standpoint. But everybody asks me, well, how come somebody has it and I don't? And so I wanted to explain it's because you need to know the crack that your water is coming through, the combination. And it's not only a two-dimensional problem, but wells are deep too, so it becomes a three-dimensional problem. Okay, so how do I get my water tested? Well, if you haven't signed up already, and I know many of you have if you're in the pink area, you can just scan the QR code. You can go here and you'll find the survey. We're all here. We're going to be here. If you haven't signed up, all you got to do is see one of us and we'll help you sign up, or you can sign up on one of the computers. And so this is what happens then if you sign up. We will be testing your water with a US EPA approved method called 537.1. It was the first drinking water method to be approved by EPA. So that just means that it's a standard method that everybody can use, and the labs have to have a certain protocol so they always get the same answers, okay? We'll be testing for 18 PFAS. You kind of heard me talk about 6 and some numbers for Ohio. There aren't numbers in Ohio or even the feds for all of those. It's an accredited laboratory, and those detection limits are going to be somewhere around 2 parts per trillion, because that's what that method 537.1 specifies. So here you go. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions. You have a water softener. Where's the best place to collect your water sample? Can we get it outside? We really like to take it outside, because 9 times out of 10, if you have a place that doesn't go through the water softener, that's what we're after. People ask me, does the water softener take out the PFAS? No. So that doesn't help you if you've got a water softener. We're going to let the water run about 10 minutes. We're going to be filling out lots of paperwork. We're going to wash our hands with this laboratory grade soap that by the end of the day, my hands will be like cracked and awful. We're going to try to dry our hands enough to get them into a plastic nitrile glove so we can take samples. You're going to see us pour water from one bottle into another, and then you're going to see us take a cap off and put a bottle underneath your spigot, fill it up. put a cap on it, put it on ice, send it to the laboratory. The turnaround time varies depending upon how many samples the lab has. The last time I talked to them, they were at about a month to get them back. Sometimes they're a tiny bit longer, sometimes they're a tiny bit shorter. But it just kind of depends on how many people are sending those things. They only have so much equipment always. So I always tell people, well, gee, it's going to look really simple when we go out there and turn on your spigot. We don't have to turn it on very enough just to get your well to kick on your pump so that we know we're getting water out of your well. But all these things you're not going to see. We're going to be wearing clothes that don't have any fabrics on them. Oh yeah, PFAS. We're not going to have been eating anything because of the food wrappers. Oh yeah, PFAS. No waterproof papers, no sunscreens, no makeup. Anything with fluoro in the name. We have to use glass. We can't use glass bottles because it actually sticks to glass bottles. The lab sends us plastic bottles. Anything that's got a tubing or anything in it that has any of those, alphabet game things there. We're going to wear old clothing. So I always tell you, you want us to look really bad when we come out, okay? Like no makeup, really old clothes, maybe some holes in them because try to find 100% cotton, anything if you're a girl. Yeah, so our goal then is to collect these samples where we don't cross-contaminate, and you think you have it in there when you don't, because remember how little a part per trillion is? You don't have to touch very much in the wrong place to give you a false reading that says you have it there. So we try to be super, super careful. The laboratory's results will come directly to an email address. We will email you the results. And if you don't have an email address, we will mail them to you. We'll write you an email that explains it because this report's going to be like 20 pages long. And yeah, Mike has had his water tested. Yeah, you don't want to have to look at 20 pages. You just want to know, do I have it? How much do I have? And do I have a problem? So that's what we'll do. We'll tell you if you exceed any US EPA health advisory level. We'll tell you if you exceed any Ohio EPA action level. And some other numbers, if you happen to have something that there isn't an Ohio number or a US EPA number for, there are some other states who have actually adopted what's called MCL, so those enforceable things. And one of the New England states, for example, takes 5. What you need to know is how often you need to replace the media, because the carbon will wear out and the membranes will wear out. And then you're not protected, and sometimes you can even get more. So it will get stuck on the carbon, and then all of a sudden it will slough off all at once. And so you get a higher slug, and you didn't even know it. So just please, you need to do maintenance, okay? If you put something in your faucet or in your house, just please be advised that you just can't put it on there and then never remember it's there. Okay, and whatever the manufacturer's instructions say, please pay attention. Okay, so just a couple more and I'm just about done. So this was the thing that came out in August that I thought you might be interested in. So the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine just put out some advice for your doctors, clinicians. Okay, so it used to be just a doctor, but I'm sure now it's a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner or whoever takes care of you that says, hey, you ought to consider testing the blood of people in these particular things. Like they specifically mentioned firefighters, people that work in commercial airports, people that work on military bases, people that have farms where they apply sewage sludge, or other areas that are known to be contaminated. And the reason is, this stuff gets into your body and then it stays in your blood, and then it's your blood that has some of those issues. So they put these things out, and if for some reason you know somebody who fits into that category, how do you get your blood tested? The top portion there is on the Ohio EPA website, and it will tell you that if you want your blood tested, you have to have a prescription, that the cost is between $500 and $800 just to have the analysis done alone. And that doesn't include having the person that takes it or maybe paying for shipping it. So it's not cheap, okay? So this year, the industry has been working hard to do different things. Now there's this little finger stick at home kit, and it's not cheap either. It's still $400, but you just go online, you can order it, they'll send it to you, you can stick your finger, you send it back to them, and then they'll send you the results via email. And so you can see if it's in your blood, and that particular document has levels for then your professional clinician, whether can I just use doctor, to your doctor or whomever, that gives them ideas of if you have this number in your blood, what kind of test you ought to look at to make sure you don't develop something. So you can find it early. So the big thing, though, that everybody's going to tell you is you need to reduce your exposure. So even if you don't have it in your water, you know you're being exposed to it other places too. So how do you do it? Well, drinking water, remember that's the number one. Don't eat fish from areas with fish advisories. So if there isn't any in this particular area, which I know. Stop, here's my thing, stop feeding microwave popcorn to those people that you love. Okay, I'm assuming you love everybody. Explore reducing exposure to household items and products that contain PFAS. There are lots of websites and green sites that will have listings of products that have PFAS or manufacturers that have taken them out under public pressure. And use non-stick pans carefully. They're much more of a problem if you heat them up without food in them. How's that? Okay, last thing, 10-day schedule. So sign up for your free testing if you're in the pink area. It ends October 15th. So our sampling right now is scheduled for between Thanksgiving and Christmas, but subject to change. And hopefully we would like to be out earlier because I really don't want to have to collect samples between Thanksgiving and Christmas. If you're signed up and eligible, you will receive an email or a phone call with the date and the window of time. Our goal was to put everybody together so that we just like march down your road, you know. So that's part of what's driving this. You get your results likely within 1 month of collection, pending laboratory workload, holidays. We'll email your results unless you don't have an email or you need a hard copy. We'll send them to you. Look for the contingency plan on alternate treatment or bottled water. It's supposed to be out no later than November 1st again. There's some review that has to be done with it to make sure that we all got it right and that the information is the correct message. And then watch for the contingency plan on Butler Township's website. They've done a super nice job and it's a really good place. They've got a bunch of other information up there. The Ohio EPA, the Ohio Department of Health, the US EPA, they all have great websites. And if you just type them in with PFAS, you will find more information than you ever wanted. Okay, so thanks again to Aullwood. And this is where we do questions, I think, if you're waiting.
Question?
Yes.
One of your first projections on the tree up there showed the map in the pink area.
Yes.
I couldn't read the tiny print, but we live on Antioch School Road, and that appeared to be a blue area.
So the blue area is not eligible for free testing. Only the pink area under the terms of this contract and how everything was set up and how the money was granted. Yep.
Although you tested our water last year, and we were below 70, but we're definitely above 2.
Mm-hmm. So again, so people ask me, and I usually put them up here, do I have to do something? No, these are advisory levels. Do you want to do something? That's a different thing. This contingency plan that's coming out, I hope is going to list costs, prices, models, makes, places to get them, places for people to install, all those things, which if you want to do something should be very helpful, regardless of where you live, okay? So kind of watch for that, okay? Yeah.
We've got a letter, does that mean that we are in the pink area?
Yes, if you got a letter from Montgomery County and Butler Township recently, you are in the pink area and you are eligible to sign up, and we can just help you over here, okay, before you even leave and get you signed up for free. Yes, sir.
You're not hungry, you go ahead and test it out.
Yes, you do not have to be home to have the house tested. As long as it's an outside spigot that we can get to, we will just do that. If you don't want somebody on your property without you knowing, we'll send you a text when we're done or when we're coming, or all those things. But you do not have to be there. You are always welcome to be at your house when we test.
Just say it, because I may not be home then.
Correct. Yep, no problem. So I sampled many people's houses when they weren't there. Okay. Yes, sir.
So they simply ask where the well is, right?
One of the reasons that we always ask about the well is I have a public health background, and they always taught me that I should do a sanitary survey. For example, if your well sat low, I went on to test somebody's well, and they had it right by their downspout in the roof, and the downspout came right by it, and then all that water literally went down into the gravel pond right beside their well. And the first thing I said was, "Hey, do you think maybe you could extend that away from your well? Because that might be a potential problem for you." So the sanitary surveys, if you just have that was, not in line, nobody ever looks at your well, which you have been usually. So this is just, I'd like to know where it is, to make sure it looks okay, and if there's a problem, we would let you know. Yep. Yeah, and if you don't know where it is, that's okay. It's just something nice we can do for you while we're out there that doesn't take any time. Yes, sir.
We had all the well shows. And they I'm sorry, but I get person dark. But it sounded to me like someone sitting in Washington. Let's go lower. And I thoroughly question that.
Okay, so the question, if you guys couldn't hear it, is I'm really upset about this low number. I don't know where it came from, and I think they're just throwing darts, and I don't know quite what to do. Is that a fair assessment?
It's fair assessment. It's always they say. They. I always question anymore. I question myself. They. I don't trust they.
Okay, so let me tell you where the 0.004 came from, because that was my first question. You heard, they surprised me, and I've been doing this for 20 years, okay? So what US EPA did with these interim health advisories is they picked the lowest person that would be affected, in this case, children. And they picked that number based on a study that was done by a doctor from Harvard in the Faroe Islands in Denmark. And these little kids, now you'll laugh, these little kids had a pretty high exposure to PFAS, and they had a lot of it in their blood. And what they discovered was when they gave them their vaccines, like the good old DPT, diphtheria, tetanus shots, they didn't develop any antibodies. Their vaccines didn't work, okay? And that's because the PFAS was interfering with the vaccines. So that particular 0.004 number is based on a child with PFAS in their blood and exposure to tetanus, believe it or not. So that's how that one was set. They're done with toxicological studies. 9 times out of 10, all the numbers that we have for, it's safe to drink or whatever, they're done with animal studies. And the GenX and the PFAS, the two on top in that slide, they were still done with animal studies. This is the first time that US EPA has used human studies and human documentation to set numbers. And they did that for PFAS and PFOA because there's been so many studies done out there on us as guinea pigs. Yes.
Are they all from water or all these hundreds of other types? Okay, it's a drink water. Yes, we drink it every day.
Good question.
You have to expose the dust.
Good question. So when they set,
Pipes people have in their home.
yep.
And
The question is, okay, so they set that just on drinking water, or what about all these other exposures? How did they really set this number? Okay, so it's my understanding that they set up a ratio of what they anticipate a normal person would have in the general public, because we all know we're exposed to it, and we all know we have it. 97% of it have it in our blood, and that they assign a percentage that's acceptable for the other parts that will be exposed to, and then they base this number based on what you would expect the additional load to be from water only that you wouldn't want to see. In that.
The pink area. Are there other places in Montgomery County that have this kind of problem?
The only thing that I can tell you is the pink area was established by the Ohio Department of Health based on the testing that they did.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, my thing is, I mean, that long list of products and what they go ask care of food, that's a planet-wide problem.
Yes, it is.
But this all leads me to wonder about the airport. We all live very close to the airport. You know that home they use to put out fires, and they do practice a lot as the PFAS in it. What has anyone investigated that?
To my knowledge, I have not seen an investigation of which I'm aware.
I mean, I suspect.
Again, I'm here to test your wells. I'm here to test your wells.
I thought that was a given. Out of the phone, they use the firefighting training at the airport. That was one of the things.
About what we're trying to do here.
You might have people that are listening.
Oh, yeah. So the main reason why we're testing is to try to figure out why is the airport a problem and try to pinpoint it, and then we'll probably go out further and start maybe looking at some other testing and that. But right now we have to get it where it's pinpointed and then say, hey, is it coming from the airport, where it's coming from, trying to find a source.
So you're working to do that.
That's what this is all about. That's what we're trying to figure out right now. That's why we're going to start somewhere. And then also to go get funding for other options from the state. And good research of where that came from for us to go after the dollars.
What
Yes.
about the other properties in the area that are newly constructed? Do you check? Like, how do we know they're not building?
Oh, the question was, at newly construction, do they test those? Are you saying like automatically? Yeah, I don't know that.
I can
Get in from there, so
I can answer that. There is no requirements to test water for perfluorinated compounds in private wells, okay, or anywhere except for public water systems that will be tested under what's called the ECMR 5 sometime in 2023 to 2024, depending, as long as they serve 3,000 people or more. Okay, that's the formal things out there. Yeah.
It may be consistent in the calls, here for like call. I don't know, talking about a requirement, they had to have a registered contract, is that new?
Question is just so people can hear, because we're zooming as well. I've been in other meetings and people have said they put in whole house treatment systems or whatever, and they didn't mention whether their person was registered or not, or if there wasn't a requirement. Is that a new thing? The answer is no. That's been around for a long time.
So, you know how someone becomes registered for people?
Yes, they register with the Department of Health. It's not a very expensive process. The requirement for people to be registered has been in effect since 1981, and the only reason I know that is because I used to work for the state health department and was involved in that many years ago.
So does that go for like UV systems or anything?
It has to do with whole house systems, not things that you put on your faucet, but whole house systems where you hire a contractor to come into your house.
Are you allowed to do it yourself?
So one of the places that you might think of as fluorocarbons is that you just love is, oh yes, your air conditioner. Those use fluorocarbons. And you remember the spray cans that they wanted everybody to go away with that was hurting our ozone layer? Those all had those fluorocarbons. Exactly. In fact, years ago there was a television show called To Tell the Truth, and it's in spacesuits. It was used even in the '60s in spacesuits and in plenum cable. It actually. When my father had his aortic valve replacement, he had to have part of his aorta replacement. That's a perfluorinated Teflon piece that they replace your arteries with. It's everywhere. Actually, there's blood, artificial blood made out of perfluorinated compounds too.
About drinking water being the big. Something past your massive, so I think inhalation. Taking a shower in steaming water with PFAS floating around. And I read a lot of articles, not a lot, there's some articles that are hard to find, but I address more, and especially if you're looking at drinking water thing, protecting.
The interesting thing that I really thought would come up today is skin. Is it safe to take a shower? And I will tell you that there are not any scientific studies out there of which I personally am aware, and I've read lots and lots, and I even checked because I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't have old information, that apparently dermal is not the route of entry through your body as much as many other things. That ingestion, and it doesn't mean that you can't get some of it that way, I'm sure. But if you look at here's the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is you eat it and you drink it, and that's a much bigger exposure than the others. But that may change with studies too, okay?
Linda, what about cooking with it like you're boiling lobsters?
Okay, if you're boiling, people always want to know, can I boil it out? Like you would with bacteria, you get boil water orders if you live on a public water system, and the answer is no. All that does is concentrate it for you. So.
Is it in concrete?
Is it in concrete? I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
Construction around the airport.
Don't know.
They're using thousands of yards of concrete.
I do not know the answer to that. I'm sorry. Yes.
You talked about the whole house application permits. And Montgomery County?
It's my understanding that your contractor has to get it in order to comply with a public water system from the health department. I don't know if you have a building department.
I don't think from the town's gonna be.
So the answer for people listening that they're streaming live is there is no permit needed from the township.
And is water lines possibly going to be coming in Antioch and to get rid of our well?
Well, again, this is kind of part of, I think, this is kind of part of the start of the whole water line situation. So we've got to go figure out the numbers, where we're kind of concentrating from, and then how to figure out how we can run water and how to get funding. But it's working on funding as we speak.
One side, of Antioch, one side Pleasant. We're so close.
Right. And I'm right here on Stoneport.
Yeah.
So I'm right in the same boat everybody in this room is. So so that's one piece of work we'll go after, and they're actually in process going after it as we speak. Hoping that if they, I don't hope it's in the system, but if they figure out where it's coming from, that's where we're going to go to the state and say, hey, we need city water run. But my whole thing, I'm not sure city water's even going to pass with numbers. Yeah, that's a concern for me. So yeah.
And you can test that, though, so what,
Now, everybody's testing with the same methods. They're using 537.1 or 533. Laboratories haven't had an opportunity to lower their detection limits and see if they're capable of doing that yet. And, you know, I used to laugh. When I started this, you couldn't send a PFAS sample to a laboratory anywhere in the United States and have it analyzed unless you were in industry. So I used to have to ship things through customs to go all the way to British Columbia to get them analyzed for PFAS for my clients. Okay, so now, I mean, there are several laboratories that do it. There's a lot of people working on it. These are household words. Okay, so this is like the build it and they will come. This will all happen, but it doesn't happen just like that. They will find ways to take it out of water that we haven't even dreamt up yet. There are all kinds of things coming. They're just not here right now. May or may not be right here, right now. Okay, so yes, sir.
Well, two things. Number one, somebody was saying they couldn't get it tested on Antioch School, but all those addresses are in there. Question was, so I know that it was talking about reverse osmosis and carbon filters. Does a standard, regular, old-fashioned salt water softener do anything for it?
No, a saltwater softener does not do anything for you. It does not take it out. The only reason we ask to be able to test before it, if we can get there, is to make sure that maybe it doesn't concentrate a tiny bit and then dump sometimes so that your concentrations would be off. But we don't think that it does that. We don't have any reason to believe that. But I grew up with a health department background, taking the samples from people's private wells, and I was always taught you want to get the pure water that comes out of the well so you know what's coming in. Then you can make a decision about what you want to do. Yes, sir.
Recording is talking about getting water mains ran certain areas, but you know, for the homeowner, you've got a few $1,000s cost getting it made in your house. Is there any thoughts on
We don't,
trying to point a finger?
we're not that far down the road yet on that. So to the property, you know, and up to through the road, get the water mains run. Just try to help restore everybody's property values, our main goal.
Okay, so that's the quiet part. That kind of means that at least publicly you're done asking questions. I just want to take the opportunity to thank everybody who came and sat through the talk. I know some of it's technical and some of it's boring, and I hope some of it's interesting. And if you haven't signed up and you're in the pink area, would you please see one of the people that have computers so we can help you if you want that, or you can go home and do it. There's a QR code that came on your letter if you know how to use that and you want to. There's also this HTTPS, which is where you go to the website to sign up, and that is a 0 and not an O. We have had that question. You've still got the letter from your house. It also has a telephone number to call. If you call, you get Sarah there, okay, on the other end of that telephone. So please feel free to call us and ask us questions.
And the reports, so I had paid Linda to come out. I've got 3 wells right over here on Stone Quarry. I mean, the reports that they come back from that is, I basically just started looking at it, and that's who I called London to the sense that she basically broke it all down for me. But the reports are very thorough. So if you haven't signed up, it'd be great. Everybody to sign up.
We had a slide that had this ostrich, you know, with its head stuck in the ground, okay? And I couldn't find it because it was on a slide. That tells you how old I am, right? It was on a slide. But I know I made it so it was digital so I could use it. But the answer is not knowing doesn't help you here. So while you have an opportunity and you're in the pink area, please have your well tested. If you had it tested before, please have it tested again. Not everything in life is constant and static. So just do it, and we'd love to come out and sample your wells and knock on your door, and even if you're home or if you're not home, how's that? So.
Just stick around if you guys, anybody's got questions you want to ask.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.